Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm so excited to talk with all of you. And we are going to talk about our housekeeping first. If we can go to the next slide. So today we want to just do a few rules. One, we want people to know if you have a question, please use the Q&A function. We want you to ask as many questions as possible. Now, we can't answer any specific questions. So if you have any about your COVID idol or any of those things, please know we cannot answer those specific questions here. This is for a general Q&A function. Also, the U.S. Small Business Administration does not endorse Public-Private Strategies Institute. This session is being live streamed and recorded, so a copy of this webinar will be sent to those who registered, and you can always rewatch it on Facebook Live, both on Public-Private Strategies Institute page, as well as the SBA's page. And then again, please do not share any personal information in the Q&A function. I cannot stress that enough. Please do not share. And with that, let's go to the next slide. My name is Renee Johnson, and I'm a senior advisor here at Public-Private Strategies Institute, and we're so excited for you to join us here today. Let's go on to the next slide. We're here to talk about building a better America, and today's goal is to connect all of you small business owners with critical resources and information that's going to help you with your businesses. So the bipartisan infrastructure law, the American Rescue Plan, Made in America, these are all resources that were created by Congress that may provide opportunities to help your small businesses thrive. So these briefings will highlight particularly steps you can take to learn how to take advantage of these existing programs, update regarding programs and recent policy announcements, and discussion of important timely policy issues, including paid leave, tax credit, access to affordable childcare, hiring and retaining workers, and then healthcare access and its cost. Now, before we get started, I'm so excited to introduce to you our first speaker for today. Our first speaker is the Associate Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Disaster Assistance, Francisco Sanchez Jr. Before the SBA, Mr. Sanchez served as the Deputy Homeland Security Emergency Management Coordinator for the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, leading strategic development, planning, public affairs, and community preparedness initiatives for Texas, the largest county. Now that's huge because that is a lot of preparedness that he was getting people to do. Under his leadership, the county has responded to historic hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, and major industry incidents, averaging a presidential declared disaster every 9 months. In addition, Mr. Sanchez has served as a leader or a member of several emergency response efforts, including inclement commander for the initial Harris County Emergency Management Response to COVID-19, and on the FEMA National Advisory Council Integrated Public Alert and Warning Systems Subcommittee, as well as Hurricane Katrina, Rita, and Ike. He is a graduate of the University of Houston and Sam Houston State University. And without further ado, Mr. Francisco Jr.
Renee, thanks so much for that kind introduction. And I know we'll be discussing Pride Month later. So just let me say, glad to be here as part of that and part of an administration that values diversity and all the great work that comes from having a diverse set of folks at the table that look like America, and how grateful I am to serve and to represent that perspective here at the SBA. And to work with others across the federal government that are making our workforce more diverse to be able to tackle these challenges from diverse perspectives. So I appreciate that and y'all's recognition of this month as we move forward. So we will be talking a little bit about what SBA is doing now and giving you a glimpse into what we'll be doing in the future. But if we'll move to the first slide, it's critical that no matter what we are doing, the most critical factor in determining how well you will survive a disaster and recover is what you do. It's really a relationship between what we do and what you do. So as we enter hurricane season, I want to make sure we talk about a few tips that are going to be critical to make sure that our businesses, as well as homeowners and renters, need to do to be prepared as we move into what will be another active hurricane season. First and foremost, establishing a communications plan. and subscribing to local emergency management alerts. Those alerts from your officials are targeted to your specific communities. And so I urge you to listen to those voices. They know your communities well. They have plans that are well rehearsed, and they are able to provide you the latest information on what you need to do to stay safe, especially as hurricanes become more frequent. They strengthen a lot quicker. Forecasts can change, so staying tuned with them is critically important. Protecting your vital information on the cloud. You want to make sure that the information that's important for your business is easily accessible, no matter where you are. Under any scenario, whether you are not impacted directly as a business owner or your residence is fine, sometimes it's difficult to get around after a disaster. So having access to that information at your fingertips, no matter where you are, is not only important for hurricane season, but for your day-to-day business to be able to be resilient. And as we face another historic hurricane season in terms of the forecast, review your insurance coverage. Make sure that you are insured for what you need to be insured. And this is always a good time of the year to kind of go through that checklist and just do that insurance check to make sure you're where you need to be. Parts of that include taking a video inventory of your property, considering business interruption insurance coverage as well. Those are critical steps to protect against losses if you find yourself having to face a disaster and are impacted. Facilities and operations planning are critically important. Considering e-commerce solutions. I know at this stage of COVID, that's something that many businesses have already done, but you may want to see how you can improve on that, or there might be different avenues for you to move forward in e-commerce in a natural disaster type of scenario. Have alternate locations to be able to resume operations quickly, and evaluate your supply chains. One thing we also learned during COVID that's critical moving into hurricane season is you may have a plan, your suppliers or your customers may have plans that align with that or don't align with that. So it's also important to check out and reach out to them and to see how those plans might integrate. Also, while disasters are unfortunate, there are services that need to be procured after a disaster to speed up recovery and to meet the needs of those local communities. So engaging in pre-disaster contract development opportunities is something you should consider to see if there's an opportunity for you in that space to engage in doing business and to find ways to contribute through that process of rebuilding your community and helping those that may be impacted by the disaster as well. And also, plans are helpful and they're great, but you need to test those plans. So I would encourage you to do that with managers and employees as well, to make sure that everybody is socialized to that plan and everybody's on the same page moving forward should you have to deploy that plan. So now we'll talk a little bit about what we do when it does come time to respond to a disaster. Each year, the SBA provides billions of dollars in low interest, long-term disaster loans. And we do that across the board to a variety of audiences. While we're the Small Business Administration, we're also one of the only federal agencies that, to this scale, helps customers at every spectrum, from businesses, homeowners and renters, but also private nonprofits. And so that's a broad set of audiences that we have to prepare and plan for, and getting ready to be on the ground and be part of the recovery process. And we help you in various modes, from real estate damage, personal property damage. For businesses, this is critically important. We help in lending to cover economic injury, and it can cover any number of things from machinery and equipment and inventory, in addition to helping you rebuild for those physical losses as well. And if you're active duty military, we have some programs that are specialized for you to help you get back on your feet and be ready for the next disaster that may come. And we're looking at $1 billion physical disaster events. The next slide will show a trend that gives us a glimpse in terms of what we're facing and why we're having to scale up at SBA to be able to meet the unique challenges that lie ahead. The last year, the United States experienced 20 separate billion-dollar disasters, totaling about $145 billion in damage. If you do the math and average it out, that's a $1 billion disaster almost every 24 days or so. That is a pace that we have to be able to scale up to respond to, but it should also be a good indicator of what you should be doing to be able to be prepared and use that as an incentive. That very alarming statistic of taking initiative to help your business and yourself be prepared should you encounter a disaster, whether it's something of that scale or not. Any size disaster can be disruptive to your business, and so that's critically important. And moving ahead, where we are now, this is just the trend. Right now, 49% of the continental United States is in drought mode. That's actually a bit of a decrease from earlier in that month in May, but we still have a forecast that looks to be a very dry and heat excessive condition over the next several months. In Texas alone, my home state, Amarillo had its earliest 100-degree day. That was on May 7th. In Abilene, in far west Texas, we had 14 consecutive days of 100-degree plus temperatures. And in my hometown of Houston yesterday, we had asphalt melting on a freeway. And that is in a part of the country that is accustomed to heat and building infrastructure to meet that heat and all of those stressors. And so that gives you a little glimpse in terms of what we're facing there. On the hurricane season for that forecast, we're looking at another highly active season and moving into the 7th consecutive year where we are likely to have a highly active hurricane season. And that's what the forecast looks like ahead. So if we find ourselves of those impacting you, now we can look at the types of disaster loans and limits that the SBA provides. As I mentioned, we provide lending to businesses, homeowners and renters, and private nonprofits. And while we're talking here from the business perspective, about 80% of our loans go to homeowners and renters after a disaster. 20% roughly go to businesses. So we'll get a little bit of an overview of how we address each of those. In terms of business loans, those go to businesses and private nonprofits. And again, we're the Small Business Administration, but any business of any size can take advantage of these opportunities to help rebuild through this lending process. The purpose is to replace real estate. We talked about property damage, inventory and equipment, and the maximum amount that a business or private nonprofit can access through our lending program is $2 million. Separate aside from that, we have the economic injury loans that, again, open to small businesses and private nonprofits. And those are working capital loans with a limit of $2 million. For homeowners and renters, we have physical damage insurance that can be up to lending that can be up to $200,000. And in addition to that, you can repair or replace personal property with a loan cap of $40,000. And so, often when you come to the SBA for these resources, it's because you may not have the insurance coverage or a gap, or may have not had sufficient assistance from other federal partners, for example, like FEMA or other local resources after disaster. So that's where we step in and provide this lending opportunity. And we'll talk a little in a moment how that rolls out in terms of an interest rate and how teach you a little bit more about that program so you can know about that ahead of time so you can utilize it if the need arises. But one of the most exciting programs that we've got, and I think is positions as well to look at the climate impacts that we're facing, is the mitigation lending. That's open to businesses, private nonprofits, and homeowners. So if you are in the category that qualifies for applying for any of these SBA loans, you have the opportunity to mitigate against future loss of the same type that you were impacted by. So 20% of the verified physical damage is what we can work with to provide you lending. For homeowners, that's limited to $200,000. And so that's an essential piece to making sure that when you rebuild, you're just not rebuilding to be where you were, but in a way that helps you be more resilient and more resistant to the impacts that you might face if that same type of disaster threatens your community, your business, and your home again in the future. So we'll move to the next slide. And this is, there's been a lot of talk recently about the rise of interest rates and how that might affect lending and the economy across the board. I will tell you that interest rates are set each quarter and are fixed at the SBA for the Office of Disaster Assistance. Economic injury disaster loan interest rates are capped at 4%. That will continue to hold. And most SBA loans are approved at the no credit elsewhere rate. And so what that means for homeowners, that's a rate right now of 1.68%. 2.88%, which is a very competitive rate. For businesses, that's 2.935%, similar for idle. And private nonprofits, the interest rate for them right now is somewhere in the middle of that. So it's a 1.875%. We do provide lending as well for people or businesses that have credit available elsewhere. Because they do have credit available elsewhere, you will see that that rate is a little higher for homeowners. That's 3.375%, 5.8 plus percent for businesses. And so regardless of that, you will see a very competitive rate because by the time you get to the point where you're coming to the SBA to help you recover, our goal is to make this resource accessible and something that folks can utilize moving forward. That's our contribution to making sure that we get businesses and communities back on their feet so local economies can begin to be moving again. And the more resilient a local economy is, the more people there can thrive. And so that's essential to our mission. So we'll talk a little bit now about building back stronger, that ties into our mitigation lending. Mitigation affordability, it's over a 30-year term. And again, those interest rates are the same that we just talked about. So very competitive, 1.688% for homeowners. And what that means is building back smarter and more resilient. So when you have to rebuild, this is a resource that you can use to rebuild in a smarter, more resilient way. Wind mitigation, just an example of one, braces and upgrades to be wind rated garage doors, for example, hurricane proof straps, upgraded to low to pressure rated windows, installing safe rooms, so storm shelters, and flood mitigation, how you might seal your roof deck. You might elevate structures, which is something that is very popular across the country as a way to mitigate against flooding, especially in those communities that are where flooding is a persistent threat. So just an example there of how you can build back stronger. So now we'll talk a little bit about now that with those programs being in place, the loan and insurance requirements. So the requirements for loan approval, one is eligibility. Damaged property must be part of a declared area. And I think you might have to click the slide one more time for some text to fill in there. Not sure what's happening there, but sticking to that slide for eligibility, you need damaged property. Has to be in a declared disaster area. And credit history. Applicants must have a credit history that's acceptable to the SBA. While it is a disaster lending program, it still is a financial transaction. And so that needs to be met. And also applicants must show the ability to repay all loans. Borrowers, and as part of making sure that investment in your home is protected and that it protects you as the business owner and as the homeowner, is hazard insurance. So it's required on all secured loans. And for flood insurance in particular, it's required by law for properties located in a special flood hazard area, and by policy for properties damaged in a flooding disaster. Aside from the lending program, I will tell you, even whether or not you are in a special flood hazard area, look at your community. This goes to the talking point earlier about making sure that looking at your insurance coverage. If your community has repetitive flooding, if you're in an area where your community is prone to hurricanes, it may be wise to take a look and get flooding insurance anyway. I will tell you, along the Gulf Coast, with the storms that have come in through year after year, causing flooding, and sometimes in areas that are not special hazard areas, that has been a good mitigation practice in terms of being able to make sure you can recover quicker. Just an example of why that's critically important. If you are a homeowner during Harvey, the FEMA grant was, I think, an average about $6,500. If you had flood insurance, your average payout was a little bit more than $100,000. So that is a significant difference in terms of what your building capability is going to be after a disaster. So we'll go to the next slide and talk about what the application process looks like. First you apply for the disaster loan. Then our property verification and loan processing team steps in to verify damage. And if approved, loan documents are forwarded to the borrower. And then that moves to the closing process. I know these slides will be available after the presentation, so I'll let you sift through this in terms of how that looks like step by step. But I do want to add right here a very important element. After a disaster, you can apply for an SBA disaster loan, but you don't have to take it. So I always encourage folks, if you think you might need to access it in the future, to go through the application process to be able to draw on it if you need to in the months leading after a disaster. And it's done in disbursements, so that's also helpful to know. They try to make initially the first disbursement within about 5 days after the applicant signs the required closing documents. And then the subsequent disbursements are made at the pace at which construction is moving forward in your house. So again, if you got a $200,000 loan approval, you don't have to use all of the $200,000. And if you want to apply but choose not to draw it down on the loan, you have that option as well. So we'll go to the next slide. This is where we are currently at SBA. We talked about the dynamic challenges that we have right now moving forward as climate crisis is causing more frequent and more catastrophic disasters. SBA is often the first and only federal agency on the ground. And we are, again, one of the first and one of the only federal agencies that touches not only homeowners, but businesses, as well as private nonprofits. And at the rate of we are responding to more disasters, we want to make sure that we can scale up, look at these challenges from a new lens. And so looking at building an Office of Disaster Assistance that is more resilient focused. And so the next slide tells you what our mission statement is. The new Office of Disaster Assistance will connect individuals, businesses, and private nonprofits with SBA disaster assistance programs and improve disaster recovery outcomes and resilience by helping communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from and mitigate disasters of all types. And so what that means is we are looking at the disaster cycle start to finish, not just focusing on recovery, but how do we tie that recovery to resilience to improve the outcomes. And as we go to the next slide, you'll see that on the first bullet point, shifting the mindset of owning the activity to owning the outcome. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of why we're bringing in resilience, why we're bringing in mitigation. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're bringing in the whole of SBA to not look at just the recovery lens, but making sure that we help people not only get back on their feet, but do that in a way that is more resilient and that has broader reaching effects than just them. So it means improving policy focus and customer experience and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're tackling those issues head on, understanding that many vulnerable communities are impacted multiple times over by these disasters and those vulnerable communities. So doing that, the customer experience, looking at how we are on the ground in a way that provides meaningful assistance and leading from the ground up when we enter a community facing disaster. And I'll just give you a couple of brief examples of what that means real world. In Kentucky, that is currently recovering from the historic tornadoes that swept through the country earlier this year, $70 million on the ground in disaster lending to help those rural communities. And that was tied to that was some enhanced outreach. We did not use the traditional model of going in, being a part of recovery centers, and then going when that application period was over. We stayed on the ground to make sure that we could reach those rural communities, work with local leaders to make sure that we were very targeted in our approach. In Colorado, in response to the Marshall wildfires, $100 million plus on the ground there in lending to help businesses and homeowners rebuild after that historic wildfire. And we're being flexible and scalable and adapting. In Colorado, we encountered an issue with rising home prices, the rising costs of materials, the challenge to find contractors to help, as those resources are spread thin. We adjusted something called a geo multiplier so that we could increase the lending capability to help those people impacted by disaster get more help from the SBA to meet their needs. In response to Hurricane Ida, from Louisiana to New York, $2 billion on the ground throughout the path of that storm, providing loans to businesses and homeowners, and been in those Southeast Louisiana communities checking in on that progress, making sure people understood the deadlines, and going into diverse communities to ensure that they were aware of the resources that they could utilize to help recover from that historic storm. So, and also we talk about silos, but making sure that we're not bringing the whole of SBA on the ground, not only interagency, but intra-agency, to maximize the outcomes for our disaster survivors. And in closing, leading resilience and recovery across the interagency by leveraging the whole of SBA. We refer to it here as the disaster enterprise. It's not just the Office of Disaster Assistance, but how can we leverage the other programs at the SBA in the recovery process? So from the Office of Economic Development, from our women's business initiatives to our small business centers, how do we bring all of that pool of resources to the SBA, to those that are impacted, to not just offer recovery assistance, but ways and paths for them to build a stronger business and be more resilient. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into where we're going. So thanks for the opportunity, and look forward to sticking around. If there's a Q&A, myself and Alex Contreras here from the Office of Disaster Assistance will be able to help with those questions. So Renee, thanks so much.
No, thank you, Francisco, and thank you for all that amazing information. And yes, we will come back at the end of this program to do some Q&A with you and your team. Now we're going to turn to Hannah Bristol. And as Francisco mentioned during his opening remarks, we're celebrating Pride today, and we're celebrating the amazing resources and all of those things about disaster relief. So now we're going to hear from Hannah Bristol, who is an associate director in the White House Office of Public Engagement. And a little bit about Hannah. Working with young people and the LGBTQ plus community and on gun violence prevention. She grew up in Virginia, where she started volunteering on political campaigns in high school and has been organizing the youth vote ever since. And we love that she started so young in advocacy and working to help so many people have a voice. Hannah has worked on the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Elizabeth Warren, as well as Next Gen America, where she led a program that registered more than 250,000 young people across 11 battleground states for the 2018 midterm elections. Most recently, she was the National Young Americans Engagement Director of the Biden-Harris campaign. She is a graduate of Middlebury College. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Oh, thank you so much, Renee, for having me, and thank you all for having me. Happy Pride, and I apologize for my camera angle. I am on my phone, so it's a little. I hope that you all can hear me well, but it's really great to be here with you all today. My name is Hannah Bristol. I use she/her pronouns. And are we doing this as a Q&A, or should I just talk a little bit about the work that we're doing?
Yeah, if you want to start there, and then we'll do a few Q&A.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so I work in the White House Office of Public Engagement. Like Renee said, I do our youth LGBTQ plus and gun violence prevention outreach, and we've just had a lot of really exciting announcements come out during Pride to build on the historic accomplishments that the president has taken to protect LGBTQ plus Americans. So some of the things that have happened so far in this administration, on the first day in office, the president signed a historic executive order on preventing and combating discrimination against LGBTQI plus Americans. So this made it so that we're fully enforcing civil rights laws to prevent discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, which has led key agencies, including Department of Housing and Urban Development, Education, Health and Human Services, Justice, the Consumer Financial Bureau, Protection Bureau, and of course, the SBA, to strengthen non-discrimination protections for LGBTQI plus people in housing, healthcare, education, criminal justice, credit and lending services, and in all other areas where people might be facing this kind of discrimination. So that has really been a landmark piece of this. And there's a lot of other work that we have done, but we know that LGBTQ plus people across the country this Pride are facing attacks in a lot of states that this is a harder Pride for a lot of folks than some of our previous Prides. And so we want to make sure that this month we're really celebrating the community and uplifting LGBTQI plus children and families, and making sure that we're continuing to show the administration's strong support for the LGBTQI plus community.
Thanks, Hannah. Can you talk about how the administration is working to support the LGBTQI plus businesses?
Yeah, of course. So, as part of the executive order that I just talked about, the president affirmed that every person should be treated with respect and dignity, and should be able to live without fear, no matter who they are and whom they love. And part of that also includes, making sure that we're addressing persistent inequities and historic barriers to capital markets and networks, and that we're really advocating for equality for the LGBTQI plus community. And so, we know that all of America's entrepreneurs deserve a level playing field, regardless of zip code, race, gender identity, or sexual orientation. And, the administration and the SBA have been really committed to advancing that through things like the Community Navigator Pilot Program, the SBA's Council on Underserved Communities, and other ways that we're making sure that, every day we're able to connect LGBTQI plus people with the resources they need in order to be successful.
Wow, that's amazing and great for so many small business owners here. Community Navigator program, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. So that's very impressive and very great because it's on the ground for people, regardless of where you're located across the country. There's someone nearby, an organization that you can, find, and you can go to the SBA's website to find a community navigator, and there's a locator that you can find and access one to help you with your business needs. So that's really great to hear about that, Hannah. Thank you on that. How can people get involved or find more information about youth and LGBTQI plus initiatives from the White House?
Yeah, well, for a shameless plug, one thing you all can do is follow me on Twitter at Hannah Bristol 46. But I really am trying to uplift and amplify announcements across the administration as they relate to the communities that I'm covering, so that there's a place you can go to see the announcements, because I know that there are so many announcements that are happening all the time, and it can be hard to keep track of all the work we're doing. I also have email lists for both communities, and I have links that I am not able to drop in the chat, but I can send over. Maybe you all could send it around us and follow up. But we're trying to make sure that we're really curating, keeping folks up to date on the announcements that are relevant to the community, so that you all know all of the historic work that we're doing to advocate for young people, to advocate for the LGBTQI plus community. And then I know through webinars like this, you're doing so much to advocate for entrepreneurs and small business owners.
Yes, thank you. And yes, we will definitely take all those links. We will share, because this is being recorded, and we're going to email it to everyone who registered today, and it's on Facebook Live. So guess what? It has a home. It will be living on the SBA website and on, Facebook page and PPSI Facebook page as well. So people can visit it for days, weeks, months, years to come, and see these amazing resources and these lists that you are referring to. So we'll make sure that it gets posted there. Awesome. Well, thank you, Hannah. Well, and Hannah, is there anything else that your office is working on or doing that you want to uplift today before we let you go? Because I know that there are so many things happening at the White House, so we don't want to hold you for too much longer.
Yes, for sure. Sorry, I was getting off mute. But yes, one thing I forgot to mention that I really want to make sure folks have a chance to take a look at is that last week at the President's Pride reception at the White House, we signed a historic executive order on advancing equality for LGBTQI plus individuals. So there's a lot to this executive order, and you should check it out online. But some key pieces of it is that it's responding to the harmful state attacks on LGBTQI plus youth by developing sample policies for states to protect student well-being in schools and address barriers to healthcare. It limits the harms of conversion therapy by ensuring it's ineligible for federal funds. It expands funding for voluntary programs that counsel parents with LGBTQI plus children. And it also supports LGBTQI youth in the child welfare, juvenile justice systems, and promotes access to mental health and suicide prevention care, including gender affirming care. And it also has some pieces on supporting LGBTQI plus seniors. So there's just a lot in here to support the community, to make sure that we have the resources that we need in order to thrive. And I really would encourage folks to check it out if you haven't heard about it yet. It's an extremely exciting occasion. That was really great to see the president sign it on stage last week. He was surrounded by 6 LGBTQI plus young leaders from across the country. And it was really, really an incredible day to have an incredible accomplishment. So we would love for you all to check that out as well.
Thank you, Hannah. And that's on the White House
White House website, but I'll include it in my link package for you all.
Awesome. We'll make sure we send it out, and don't forget to go to the White House website and check that out, everyone. And thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on with the next portion of our program. We can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about a couple of additional resources like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the American Rescue Plan, and Made in America. And then we're going to talk a few things about updates you should know about COVID-19 and how you become a vaccination small business leader in your community. So the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. As many of you know, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was signed in November 15th, 2021 by President Biden. And it was a law that was historic investment of $550 billion in new funds for large infrastructure projects, supply chains, broadband, and drinking water. This is the largest investment in the nation's infrastructure since 1956. This means there's going to be projects to deliver clean water, expand the country's broadband, repair the crumbling roads that we see across the country, and then also modernize public transportation. So what does this all mean? Let's go to the next slide. This means that it's going to have an impact to small businesses because it trickles down to many businesses who will be able to be a part of it and have contracting opportunities. This will virtually touch every part of Main Street in the economy. The law will expand access to tens of billions of dollars to federal, state, and local contractors, right? The U.S. Department of Transportation is going to award more than $37 billion in federal contracts. It's going to support an estimated 700,000 in jobs per year, help small businesses hire new employees and reach new customers. If you want to foster the development of Main Street businesses and those in the underserved communities, you want to go to this guidebook, which is at build.gov to learn more information. And don't fret, my friends. We're going to send this information out to you. So this webinar will be an email if you registered. So tell your friends, tell everyone you know, all your other friends that are small business owners as well, to sign up to these webinars so that they can get these resources. There'll be additional links. Some will be to like Department of Transportation directly, where they can click on it and see other opportunities as well. So there'll be more to come within the slide deck that you get in your email. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the American Rescue Plan. In 2021, Congress also passed the American Rescue Plan, also known as the ARP, and the CARES Act, which focused on small businesses and consumers, right? It support communities that were struggling in the wake of COVID-19, and the plan provided critical support for communities, provided emergency grants, lending, and investments to hard-hit small businesses so that they can retain and train workers. Distributed more than $360 billion in emergency funding for state, local, and territorial and tribal governments. And it helped hard-hit public transit agencies avoid layoffs and service reductions, which disproportionately harm workers who are more likely to depend on public transportation systems to get to work. Let's go on to that next slide. The American Rescue Plan also created the Community Navigator Program, which we talked about earlier with Hannah. This was designed to reduce barriers that underrepresented and underserved entrepreneurs often face in assessing the programs that they need to recover, grow, or even start their businesses in their local communities. There was a total of $100 million in funding that was gave to 51 organizations. The selected projects cover diverse communities across the US, Puerto Rico, and Guam. The grantees will serve as hubs and centralized lead organizations will incorporate spokes. So basically you have larger organizations in certain communities that will then work with subgroups that are smaller organizations that are sort of like on the ground day to day in those local municipal communities. So smaller organizations that people know day to day, day in, day out are working with local businesses to connect them with critical resources and assistance, such as for financial assistance, access to capital, contracting and procurement, marketing, operations, business development, exporting even, and industry-specific training. So if you want to know more about how you can get connected to community navigators, go to the SBA's website and click on the community navigator and the locator button so you can find out more information and where your local community navigator is located. Let's go on to that next slide. So let's talk about this tax incentive. The paid leave tax incentive was under this program where employers can offer up to 12 weeks of paid family leave, and you could take care of a family member, maternity or paternity leave with biological or adopted children. In exchange for offering the leave, employers will receive as much as 25% for the amount of wages replaced, right? They will get that tax credit. The policy is targeted to hourly employees who would not otherwise have access to paid family leave. Employees who participate, cannot make more than $72,000 per year. You want to talk with your tax preparer or whoever assists with your taxes as a small business owner, and to see if this is something that you could still take advantage of, or if it's something that works well for your business. So check that out. And make sure that you take these opportunities to help your business. These are opportunity and resources for you to use to ensure that you can continue making sure your business thrives. Let's go on to the next slide. Now we're going to talk about Made in America. Made in America is ensuring the future is made in America, right? By all of American workers. And it was launching of a whole government initiative to strengthen the use of federal procurement to support American manufacturing, to continue building on these implementation efforts and ensuring these ambitious goals aren't just talked about. The executive order was created by the Biden administration to create this office called the Made in America office within the White House Office of Management and Budget, which is also OMB. The Made in America office works to implement federal procurement and financial management policy to help carry out the president's vision of the future to be made in all of America by all American workers, including minority entrepreneurs and the small businesses in every region in our country. In order to sign up and learn more about it, you want to make sure you check out the SBA's website on how to become a federal contractor, stamps.gov, and GSA. And again, go to madeinamerika.gov to get more information on this program. Let's go to that next slide. So now we're going to talk about how you can become a vaccination, a COVID vaccination leader in your community. The United States has experienced several waves of the pandemic, and it's going to continue going on. We want to make sure that you all are prepared, and the White House has a website that you can go to, which is the whitehouse.gov/COVID plan. They have several sort of updates that you can check out. And again, we're going to make sure the slide deck comes to you so you can check it out and make sure that you go to that website to learn more about what's going on and what the administration is doing to combat COVID-19. Let's go to that next slide. And as a small business leader, what can you do? Well, get vaccinated, get your booster shot. And if you're already vaccinated, encourage others, whether it's your employees, family, friends, neighbors, your community, to get vaccinated and boosted as well. Create a plan for your business, review your state and local policies, seek assistance, the tax credit we talked about, see if that's a possibility for your business. Also encourage, incentivize, and mandate vaccines, communicate that plan to your employees, both written and verbally, and then continue to follow the Center for Disease Control Prevention, the CDC, most of us know that as, with the guidelines and guidance of wearing a mask and social distancing, washing our hands, which we all should always continue to do, and then continue to check out these resources that are listed here that of course will be in your packet when you get it tomorrow in your email. And don't forget, again, the whitehouse.gov/COVID plan for additional resources. Let's go on to the next slide. Well, now I'm excited because we get to talk to another amazing leader in the small business community, and that's Andreas Wilder, who is the executive director of StartOut, which is the largest national nonprofit organization supporting LGBTQ entrepreneurs. He has 2 decades of successful startup experience as a co-founder, executive, angel investor, advisor, and board member. Andrea's career focused on corporate and business development, predominantly with early stage technology firms. And over the last decade, he has raised equity and debt financing from first tier VCs, investment banks, strategic investors, and economic development partners. He secured government funds to augment private capital and completed acquisitions in the US, Europe, and Latin America. Most of his director and advisor positions focus on fast-growing software and clean tech companies. Andreas has also co-founded an angel group that invested in an exited tech firms with cross-border strategies and continues to be active in this space. Andreas earned an MBA from Stanford and a JD. I'm just so excited to introduce you all to the amazing, fantastic, dynamic, powerful Andreas of StartOut. Hello, Andreas.
How can I respond to that introduction? So awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are so thankful for you to join us today. And I mean, your bio is so amazing. You've done so much to help so many and have one of the largest organizations in the country. I mean, wow, we're just so thankful for all the businesses that you help. You help so many people live and keep their dreams thriving. So thank you for the work you've done. What is the core of StartOut's work? Like, how do you accomplish the work that you do?
Well, first of all, happy Pride and thanks for having me. And I feel like I have the best background actually for my Zoom call. I'm bragging a little bit here, but it is Pride after all, so might as well go for it.
Yes, and
so,
be prideful in your pride.
Not a problem here. Thank you. So it's just briefly, StartOut, where we mentioned, is a national nonprofit, and we accelerate the growth of the community. We really want to drive the economic empowerment, and it's so important because we want to build a world where every LGBTQ plus entrepreneur has equal access to lead, to succeed, and to shape the workforce of the future. That's so incredibly important. So you asked how we accomplish that, right? So we're a global community of about 21,000 people established in 2009. We integrate our partners, our sponsors, our supporters in a unique ecosystem to support each other. And the way we do that is actually on an online portal where we reach all corners of the United States. It's really important to us that we can be everywhere, not just in New York and San Francisco, entrepreneurial hotspots. So that's kind of core to what we do. And fortunately, we built that whole infrastructure prior to COVID. So when COVID hit, and hopefully we'll soon be out of it, of course, but we're really prepared to support all LGBTQ entrepreneurs in the country.
Wow, that's amazing.
So our goal is really over the 5 years to facilitate $1 billion in funding for about 3,000 companies. Not everyone gets funding, right? But really important. And what we want to do with that is create 25,000 jobs and help generate about $20 billion in economic value. These are big numbers, and we're a tiny, tiny team. We're just 15 staff members, but we are super fortunate to be able to count on over 1,000 volunteers who help our entrepreneurs day in, day out.
Wow. You guys are a small but powerful, dynamic team, and we thank you all for the work you guys do. Again, I'm just wowed by that. And diving into that more, I mean, you guys have such lofty goals, and I know you're going to achieve them, but what are some of those specific challenges you're solving for when it comes to, LGBTQ business owners that you're running across during this time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've done some research, and you can see that on our website, plug alert, .startout.org. You can see the research, the SBI there. And we looked at actually 400,000 companies in the United States. And what we found is in the roughly 100 metropolitan areas with at least 50 growth entrepreneurs, over 2/3 don't have a single out LGBTQ entrepreneur self-identified. That's just crazy, right? In 2/3 of all those metropolitan areas, not one self-identified as a growth entrepreneur. We also think there are about 10 times as many entrepreneurs, LGBTQ entrepreneurs, as they self-identify. So we really have two challenges. One is the one that every ecosystem builder has, is accelerating the companies, make sure they're successful, they have what it takes. Basically, just giving all the tools they need. But the other one is inspiration. If you don't know a single out entrepreneur in your own hometown, what are the chances that you're also going to start a business, right? It's hard enough to be an entrepreneur. I've been one for 20 years before I took down this wonderful job. But you want to have every passionate entrepreneur who has what it takes to help rebuild the economy, to actually take the treacherous journey of entrepreneurship and small business ownership, but you want them to have the same chances. And so you don't want any self-selection out of it. So I think the biggest challenge we have is not necessarily just the tools, but it's the inspiration. Yes, I can do it too. There are other people who look just like me, so I want to do the same.
No, and that's huge because, in order to thrive, it's also like being comfortable and saying like, yes, there's going to be difficult days, but I can do it. I can still make this happen. And it's so hard to pull yourself up by the bootstraps to do that. So I can understand
so true.
Totally what that means. It's hard.
Very hard, but worth it.
Yeah.
Worth it.
Yeah, it's hard. So, okay, well, we are familiar, the SBA, PPSI are familiar with engaging communities, particularly around the racial and cultural identities. What are some of those specific modalities of engaging people with their sexual gender orientation as the centerpiece? Because, sometimes people don't necessarily lead with that, and rightfully so, right? People should not have to identify just to have some sort of assistance or help, right? We should just want to help people. But how do you kind of approach that? And especially because you don't want to out people or anything like that. But how do we engage people to be resourceful and helpful?
Great point on not outing people, and it's often not obvious, right, at first sight whether someone's LGBTQ or not. So you kind of come out every single meeting again and again and again and again. So people sometimes forget that. We have an extremely diverse community, and the sexual orientation or gender identity might be a first, a second, or even a third identity, right? We don't really know. So having that exciting opportunity to serve members with all that intersectionality among our members, that is really incredibly important. Now, the sexual orientation per se is a very powerful connector. So we see that, for example, with our mentors. Like, we have incredible mentors, over 400 of them, and they wouldn't necessarily lend their time to just anyone, right? They're highly accomplished business people, but because of the sexual orientation, because of the association with that, they're actually willing to provide their services for free, pro bono. Everything's for free with us, and that's important to know. But the other piece then is as well with with all the intersectionality, we also rely on over 50 partner organizations that deal specifically with those other underrepresented communities and who have the trust of them. So we serve the LGBTQ members of those partners, and we of course are happy to return a favor and send our members who might be part of their crowds. Send them their way.
No, that's beautiful because I love intersectionality. That's one of my favorite words because there's no one monolithic person and monolithic business. Like, we're all so many different things that comprise so many beautiful people that do beautiful things. So that is amazing. Thank you for that. Let's talk more about Start Out. What are your flagship programs at Start Out? Like, what are some of these resources that people can reach out today and learn about?
Awesome questions. Thank you. I love that question, of course. So we have 3 levels. One is the first one is the community level, and we very much encourage everyone to participate, whether you're LGBTQ or an ally. We want allies, right? Allies have so many resources. There's so many allies are willing to support us as well. So let's not exclude anyone. While we support only LGBTQ entrepreneurs, which is part of our mission, right? We want everyone to participate in us. So please join us at events, online, or whatever you can do. You asked about flagship. So we have the second level then is our founder programs. And these are entrepreneurs, small business owners who want to grow. and they need support growing. A lot of entrepreneurs or small business owners have great talents, great experience, but they're missing areas, and naturally, not everyone knows everything. So we have our mentorship program. We have our access to capital program with an investor portal, super important because so many entrepreneurs actually need funding to grow. And then also one-on-one expert sessions if you need an answer right away on a very specific topic. The flagship program, the top level, then is our 6-month virtual accelerator, the Startup Growth Lab. And we've so far had about 50 companies graduating, and they've done phenomenally well. They raised over $600 million. They created 3,700 jobs, and of course, counting. And they have a revenue run rate of about $250 million, just those 50 companies. So really important. It shows the power of the community. If we support each other, if we all support each other, we can do amazing things together.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm seeing some questions coming in. So I just want to throw this out there before we end today's conversation. Can you be anywhere in the country and connect with StartOut? And if so, how can people connect with StartOut?
Yes, anywhere in the country, even from outside. 92% of our members, of our 21,000 members, are in the US, 8% from outside. Just go to startout.org and sign up and start exploring how we can help you. Anyone can sign up, absolutely, from anywhere in the country. When it comes to the the support, we mentioned that before. We welcome allies as much as LGBTQ members because they have so much to offer to our community.
Wow, thank you, Andres. This has been so impactful, so awesome, and of course, we're going to have you back for another webinar because we believe, and every month is Pride Month. We should always be celebrating each other. So we'll be talking with you again at another webinar because we will always be continuing to uplift the message.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And with that, everyone, we want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate all of you for coming to today's webinar. If you have an SBA related question, please go to answerdesk@sba.gov. If you have any questions about a copy of this webinar, please feel free to email us at events@publicprivatestrategies.com. Again, a copy of this webinar will be sent to you if you register for this event, or feel free to go to the SBA or PPSI Facebook pages, as this has been recorded and will be there and living there. And with that, our next webinar will be on July 6th. At 2 p.m. and it's going to be about Made in America. So come back and learn more about how we can talk about manufacturing and all those things about Made in America. So see you guys then. Thank you so much for joining us today.